Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So before we get into today's video, I just wanted to go ahead and give a shout out to Chris, my new Patreon. Thank you so much for joining the Patreon family, and I cannot even begin to express how much I appreciate you. So today's case is yet another case of a young woman who went missing out of absolutely nowhere with absolutely no answers. It's yet another case that is absolutely terrifying because it could have happened, and it could happen to any of us. She seemed to be simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, just existing as a beautiful young woman trying to live her life. It is another case that we can hopefully learn from, but another case that just shouldn't have happened to begin with. With that being said, let's just get right into today's case. Today, we are going to be discussing the unsolved disappearance of Tiffany Daniels. Tiffany Daniels was born March 11th, 1988 in Dallas, Texas, but was living in Pensacola, Florida at the time of her disappearance. Tiffany was described as being a free spirit who could brighten the mood of anyone around her. She was super creative and artistic, and she loved theater. She was actually able to combine her two favorite things and be paid for it as a job as a theater technician at the Pensacola State College, where she would paint sets for the shows that were going on. And she was really good at what she did. When she wasn't at work, she explored Pensacola's cultural attractions in downtown. She would always throw these blues and swing dance parties with a bunch of her friends, and everyone always just had this amazing time. She lived across the street from a Pensacola bay called Fort Pickens, where she would go to ride her bike, go swimming, go camping, or hiking whenever she felt like it. Her parents described her as being spontaneous and adventurous. Her father, Rodney, described her as that butterfly girl, saying that if she was saying something and a butterfly flew by, she would just go off and follow it. She cared about those around her immensely, and her parents thought that sometimes it was actually to a point that she was too nice. By summer of 2013, Tiffany's parents said that she was constantly fronting the rent for a revolving door of roommates at the house that she was leasing. People would move in, then not pay for rent or their utilities, so she would just pay the cost up front herself and then ask for it from her roommates later. And even if they didn't pay, they refused to pay, she always just felt bad for even asking and expecting them to pay, and she was so non-confrontational about it, even though it was obviously not just her responsibility and they should have been paying her their fair share. So at one point, she just got fed up with all of these different roommates taking advantage of her that she just decided to put out an ad on Craigslist for a new roommate. Before long, a 54-year-old man and father of one of her friends, Gary Nichols, responded to the ad. He was in the process of separating from his wife and just wanted to live closer to work. He was different than the roommates that she was used to because he was able to pay the bills. So by late July of 2013, he moved into the house with her. Now, Tiffany's mother, Cindy, did think that this was kind of weird. Of course, she didn't want her daughter feeling like she was living with a dad, but despite him being twice her age, it turned out that they actually had a lot in common, a lot more than they originally thought. They were vegetarians, they loved vegetable gardening, they loved cooking. He would come to her blues and swing dance parties, and they got along very well considering the really big age gap. On Sunday, August 11th, Tiffany started her day by having breakfast with her boyfriend, Gray Thomas, as sort of a goodbye because he was going to be going to the University of Texas in Austin's robotics program. Of course, this was a pretty big move for him, and he tried to get Tiffany to move with him, but she wasn't quite ready to leave Pensacola yet. But they still loved each other, and they wanted to continue their relationship, so they decided to sort of do this long distance thing, and she had plans to visit him in Austin later. So after the breakfast, Gray left and headed on his way to Texas. At this point, Gary had been living in the house for a few weeks. That same night, as the goodbye breakfast, the two decided to stay in and watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail, a movie that was based on the movie Spamalot. She had been working on the set for this play, which was to be put on in the fall. So she wanted to prepare and just kind of watch a movie that was based on that play. At the end of the night, they pretty much just went their separate ways and went to bed. Gary had work at 7 a.m. the next morning, but Tiffany hadn't really mentioned to him if she had anything going on the next day. This is why Gary found it strange when the next morning at around 5 a.m., Gary started hearing weird noises. He said that he heard the door opening and closing multiple times, so he got up to see if it was Tiffany, but he didn't see her, so he just went back to his own room and went back to bed. However, when he later got up and left for work that morning around 7 a.m., he noticed that Tiffany's car was gone. Now, this didn't really raise any concerns with him because he just assumed that she had gone to work. However, Tiffany's parents questioned this because Tiffany was not an early bird by any means. Her father said that if she had to be at the school by 7, that she'd be up at 6:55. That's just how she was. She definitely wouldn't have been up 2 hours early for her shift. But later that day, she did arrive for her normal painting shift at work. However, what was strange was that she actually asked her supervisor if she could leave her shift a little bit early and mentioned that she was going to be taking some extra time off, maybe as much as a week. She didn't really explain why though, basically just saying that she had some things to take care of. Her supervisor didn't know what she meant by this, and neither did her family. Then at 4:43 p.m., she left her shift at work. And this was the very last time that anyone had seen Tiffany Daniels again. That night, Gary noticed that Tiffany never came home from work and started to get worried. At around 10 p.m., he called his daughter Noelle, who was friends with Tiffany, and he told Noelle that he was worried about her, that she never came home, and that he didn't know of any plans that she had, and she hadn't returned any of his phone calls. But Noelle basically told him to chill, that Tiffany is an adult who sometimes goes off and does things without saying anything. You know, she might just be out hanging out with friends. Maybe she just didn't want to hang out with a 54-year-old man all the time. You know, he was a dad, so of course he was going to worry about her. But, you know, taking his daughter's advice, he just decided to relax and try not to worry about her. However, by that next morning, when she still hadn't returned home, he started to get more and more concerned. He started calling her again, but no answer. He went to work, but by the time he got home, he noticed that all of the power had been cut off. This was strange, but he had just assumed that Tiffany hadn't paid her portion of the electric bill. But when Tiffany still hadn't come home by that evening, Gary called Noelle again to let her know that she still wasn't home. And that's when she got in contact with Tiffany's parents. Noelle sent Cindy a private Facebook message basically saying that her father was Tiffany's roommate and he hadn't seen her in a few days and she hadn't reached out to anyone. Just like Noelle, Cindy initially thought that she was probably just out having a good time with her friends and just hadn't thought or had the chance to reach out to anyone. So she just called Tiffany's phone and left her a voicemail to get back to her whenever she could. However, when more time had passed and she still hadn't gotten back to anyone, including her mother, Cindy and Noelle decided to just go through every single one of Tiffany's friends that they could think of and try and call or message each one of them to see if anyone had seen her. Each friend would say that she must have been with a different friend who said that she must have been with this other friend. But when each friend found out that the other friend hadn't seen her either and that they pretty much already had been in contact with everyone, their concerns grew into a complete panic. By the end of that week, 5 days after Tiffany was last seen, her family decided that it was time to call the authorities and get police involved. They called the Escambia County Sheriff's Office and reported her missing. When police arrived at the Daniels home, they told them all of the details, but police seemed, of course, skeptical and dismissive, as they do in a lot of these cases that we talk about. They pretty much told the family that Tiffany was 25 years old. She had every right to go missing if she wanted to, and there's nothing that they could do about it. But because Tiffany actually lived in Pensacola, the case was transferred to their police department, who, according to Cindy, seemed much more interested in actually investigating Tiffany's case. Detective Daniel Harnett said that they treat every single case as the worst case scenario while hoping for the best, which obviously I think is the smart way to go about it. I don't understand why a lot of these people don't want to investigate cases right away and just assume it's nothing. Why not just go into it assuming the worst case scenario, and then if it is nothing, good, they're safe and they can be brought home. That's exactly why a lot of these cases aren't solved and why a lot of these people aren't found. But either way, Pensacola Police Department had the right idea with this one. When detectives met Cindy at Tiffany's house, as they stepped in, they asked Cindy to wait outside as they searched her room. There was no evidence of foul play in the room, and they found out that, there was evidence that she liked going hiking, backpacking, and camping, but they found no evidence that she had packed up and intended to go anywhere. Her tent was still in her room, so if she decided to leave for whatever reason, she didn't take her tent with her, which was a little bit strange. They then put out a be on the lookout for Tiffany's 1999 gray Toyota 4Runner and alerted the media. At this point, investigators started looking into those closest to Tiffany. This is when investigators found out that Tiffany had a boyfriend that left town the day before she went missing, and as you probably know, a lot of people responsible for missing persons cases are the spouse or the girlfriend or boyfriend. Now, Gray and Tiffany met in 2012 and seemed like the perfect couple together. Her family described him as being incredibly intelligent, which you can probably guess because he was going to graduate school for robotics. They also said that they got along so well together. They loved dancing together and had a great connection. Her family even said that they thought that he very well could be the one. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the day before Tiffany went missing, she had thrown a farewell breakfast for Gray before he left for Texas that day. Gary said that after Gray left, she did seem pretty down for the rest of the day. Obviously, she was going to miss him, and honestly, trying a long-distance relationship is a very scary thing. But he also said that she was excited for new prospects, that she was excited to go to Austin and meet the new people that she would see there when she went to visit Gray. Now, immediately after finding out that Tiffany went missing, her father Rodney contacted Gray immediately to see if he knew absolutely anything. He didn't really suspect foul play because, again, the family really liked him and thought that they were a great couple. When he was talking to Gray, though, Rodney was told that he had spoken to Tiffany after he left for Texas, so they talked on the phone, but he hadn't actually seen her since. Now, Rodney was not sure whether to believe him or not. He thought that he seemed honest, but wondered if maybe after leaving, he secretly went back to Pensacola to potentially harm Tiffany because maybe she didn't want to go with him or whatever the reason might be. Investigators contacted Gray as well, and the entire time that they spoke with him, they thought that he seemed very cooperative. They asked him to go over to his local law enforcement office and have his fingerprints taken. They also pulled his cell phone records, which showed that around the time that Tiffany went missing, he was headed to Texas just like he said he was. They thought that the evidence pointed more towards Gray not being involved. The next thing they wondered was if Tiffany was responsible for her own disappearance. She did seem depressed after Gray left and was going through these very big life changes, so they thought that it could have been possible that she harmed herself. Her family came out and did admit that it seemed like Tiffany wasn't totally herself in the months leading up to her disappearance. Her sister Cadence, who lived in New York at the time, said that every time she talked to Tiffany, it seemed like she wasn't totally herself. She seemed like something was very possibly weighing on her and that she felt the need to ask Tiffany if she was okay, but she still wasn't completely sure what was bothering her. One of Tiffany's friends actually came out and said that he, along with a couple of other of Tiffany's friends, had kind of all been, branching out, doing their own thing, moving away. So Tiffany didn't really have that support system that she had always been used to. They said that she was the type of girl to make friends with everyone and was pretty well loved by everyone, but she didn't really have those really close friends with those really deep connections that she kind of always felt alone. But despite all of this, Tiffany's family said that there's absolutely no way that she would have done anything to hurt herself. She was a very strong person who cared immensely about her family and would never do something like that. Detectives also questioned the possibility of her just running away for a while, but that also seemed very far-fetched to the family. Again, she cared about her family so much that she wouldn't just leave her family and leave them to worry like this. She was very spontaneous, but she was reliable. Plus, she told her own boyfriend that she wasn't ready to leave Pensacola. She had a job that she loved. She was working on something that was going to take place in that fall. So she had goals, and she was working on her art. It wouldn't make sense that she would just suddenly change her mind and just decide to leave without telling anyone after she had just made it clear that she wasn't ready to leave. She had plans for the future, including a swing and dance party that she had scheduled for 2 weeks after she disappeared. Her room showed absolutely no evidence of her packing up, so the theory of her just running off, it didn't really make any sense. The next person that they considered was Gray Nichols, Tiffany's 54-year-old roommate. Of course, this was extremely strange that the two were roommates, and so they asked him, among other people, for DNA samples. Now, it also came out that after leaving work on August 12th, Tiffany actually stopped at home while Gary was still home. But according to Gary, he hadn't heard her come in. Now, Gary worked until about 4 p.m. that day, putting him at home at around 4:30, and when he was at home, he was talking on the phone with his girlfriend who lived out of state. So he didn't realize that Sydney had come home. But Cindy is a little bit skeptical because there's actually a part of Tiffany's closet that's missing, so you can see directly into her room. There's like a foot from the ceiling to like the top of her closet where there's no space, so you can see directly into Tiffany's room. So she thinks that if Tiffany did go home, that Gary definitely would have seen her. But investigators conceded that it was possible that he just wasn't paying much attention. He was talking to his girlfriend, so he was probably pretty invested in that, just thinking about her, not really paying attention to what was going on around him. And you have to remember that this isn't when Gary was concerned. He was concerned when she didn't show up at 10 o'clock that night. So if he knew that she was at home at around 4:30 and just didn't come back, I think he would have been a lot less suspicious because he knows, okay, she stopped at home to grab stuff. She probably just went out and did her own thing, rather than, him thinking that she never showed up back home. All that to say, he was the first person who expressed concern for her not coming home that day and put the steps in place that led her to being reported missing. If he never said anything to anyone, who knows how long it might have taken for her to actually get that report in. According to Noel, Gary is very confident in their police system, and he was okay with them looking into him because he knew he didn't do anything, and he knew that the police would find this out for themselves, so he wasn't worried about it. And again, police didn't find anything with Gary to make them think that he was in any way responsible. But by this point, they had absolutely no information, no leads, no persons of interest, no suspects. So Tiffany's family took it upon themselves to start handing out flyers, start searching, and put out her face, her description of her car, and her license plate number out onto social media. Then on August 20th, 9 days after Tiffany went missing, her family received their first tip. But it wasn't really something that was good news. It wasn't something that they were hoping for or expecting to find out. Tiffany's car was actually found. A jogger who actually just happened to also be friends with the Daniels family had spotted Tiffany's 4Runner in a parking lot at Park West in Pensacola Beach near Fort Pickens. This person recognized the car right away and immediately contacted the family. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this is the area that Tiffany would often go hiking or camping pretty much whenever she felt like it. Police were notified, but they warned Cindy not to go down to that beach alone because Tiffany's car sitting at that beach still meant that something terrible could have happened to Tiffany. But she went there because she was confident that she was going to find Tiffany there just chilling, relaxing, doing whatever on the beach. Now, within Tiffany's car, they found her jug of water, a jar of peanut butter, her bicycle, her cell phone, her purse with her wallet still in it, some clothes, and her paintings. Police towed her car to be examined, and upon inspection, investigators discovered 2 fingerprints that did not belong to Tiffany. One was outside on the door handle and the other was on the steering wheel. They put the fingerprints into the system, but they didn't match to anyone, which means that whoever these fingerprints belonged to had never committed a crime before. The next thing investigators wanted to find out was when the car was driven to the beach and how long it had been there. Investigators thought that the best way of figuring out how long the car had been there was by using security footage. In order to enter Fort Pickens, you have to drive through a toll booth, and every time you do so, the camera picks up the day and time that your car was there. The camera picked up Tiffany's car at about 7:51 p.m. on August 12th, 3 hours after she left work. However, this camera did not pick up who was driving the car, only the license plate, so it's not confirmed whether this was even Tiffany driving the car for sure or not. Because of this, police went around asking witnesses if they had seen the car, how long they'd seen it there, and if they had seen who was driving it. They had a lot of people who have claimed to seen the car, but the accounts were very contradicting. This was a big vacation spot, and people weren't going to remember some random car they passed unless there was something special or something that stood out about it. Some witnesses said that it wasn't there until 2 days earlier, and remember, this was 9 days after her disappearance, while others said that they saw a man getting out of the car that same day, so when she went missing on August 12th. So we really aren't sure if these are accurate, if they're not, if, people are misremembering things, or if they're really true. But still, police didn't put much into these sightings because, again, they could be off, they could be wrong, but the family was confident in those around the area, so they went out and started handing out flyers to everyone they could find in the area, including the people who lived in the condos nearby. They had sit on their porch all the time. They were always kind of looking out and watching what people were doing, so they thought that maybe someone would have seen Tiffany or her car. They ended up handing out as many as 40,000 flyers, but no one remembered saying a thing. So something interesting that police found was that there was still sand on her bike and her bike tires, but no sand on her floorboards. This indicated to them that Tiffany could have gone out for a bike ride on the beach that evening and then, put her bike back into her car and then decided to go out for a swim afterwards. Because again, if she would have ridden her bike, put the sandy bike into her car, and then got into her car, there probably would have been some sand on the ground where she was sitting in the car, but there wasn't. Tiffany's friend actually remembered that there was a meteor shower that night, so he thinks it's very possible that that night Tiffany went out to view that. It's definitely something that she would have been interested in. It's very possible that she went out to go see this meteor shower. She went swimming, swam out too far, and wasn't able to make it back to shore. There's a lot of riptides and whirlpools in the ocean, so it's possible that she could have gone out swimming and been swept under. However, typically when this happens to someone, they usually wash back up to shore. It's not really likely that she could have swam out so far that she got pulled under and swept all the way to Mexico or something like that. That just seems kind of very far-fetched for that to have happened. The other very large possibility was that foul play was involved somewhere on that land, but the beach was 50 miles long, so it was pretty much impossible for local police to search the entire area with their very limited resources. However, the weekend after Tiffany's car was found, the Daniels family was introduced to an organization called Class Kids, which is an organization founded because of the Polly Klaas case, who was a 12-year-old little girl whose case got national attention after she was taken from us way too soon by a disgusting predator. This organization is actually coordinated with local police, U.S. National Park Services, along with 250 volunteers to search the huge amount of land along Fort Pickens and Santa Rosa Island to help find Tiffany. They used search dogs to help them do grid searches in this 90-degree heat to find any sort of jewelry or clothing or absolutely anything related to Tiffany. They searched pretty much every single square inch of that land, and they did find some fragments of clothing, some jewelry, but nothing that could be confidently tied to Tiffany. Now, they were pretty happy that they didn't find a body and there was no real proof of foul play, so they were at least happy about that. But they pretty quickly realized that this had to have meant that she either left with someone or someone left with her against her will, i.e., human trafficking. This is a very, very scary but real possibility. She just left without a trace, not even leaving anything behind. There's no evidence of anything that would indicate foul play. She left nothing behind on this entire beach. There's no evidence of anything in her car or anywhere that they searched. There's almost no way that this can be done unless someone is taken by someone who is incredibly skilled and experienced. This at least left hope that Tiffany was still alive, so her family was not going to give up searching for her. They created a Facebook page called Help Find Tiffany Daniels, which is still actually kind of active. They post every few months, leaving updates on her case as recently as August of this year. So even to this day, they still have not stopped searching. Now let's talk about the possible sightings of Tiffany after her disappearance. Now, because of the Facebook page, tips started absolutely pouring in. Noelle described this Facebook page as pretty much a full-time job with how many messages and tips they were receiving. One tip came from a store clerk who swore he saw her and recognized her tattoos. It seemed like a credible tip, so police actually went and looked at the security camera and, looked at the entire day, but saw absolutely no sign of Tiffany being in that store whatsoever. It was incredibly disappointing, and Noelle described this as the first lesson that some people just wanted to be involved in the case for whatever reason. Then, in January of 2014, another witness came forward. There was a waitress in Matrie, Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans, who claimed to have seen Tiffany and two other women. One of the women looked to be about the same age as Tiffany, but the other one looked older. The older woman dressed a lot nicer than the two younger women and was said to have been Hispanic. This waitress was disturbed at the body language that she noticed from these two younger women. She said that these two women were wearing long sleeve shirts that were pulled over their knuckles and they looked pretty freezing despite it not being that cold. The waitress also said that the two younger women didn't look up the entire time that they were there. They didn't really communicate with her either. Instead, the older, more well-dressed women spoke for them most of the time. She also pointed out something that the girl who looked like Tiffany said that was strange. She ordered a fish entree for lunch, but asked the waitress if it was made with fish broth or chicken broth. To most people, this isn't super significant, nothing too out of the ordinary, but this really stood out to Tiffany's mother because one time they were actually at a restaurant and she ordered a fish entree, but that restaurant had actually run out of the fish broth, so they substituted it with chicken broth. Well, Tiffany noticed right away and wanted nothing to do with it because she was pescatarian, which means that she didn't eat any meat outside of fish. So the fact that she asked this waitress if it was made with fish broth or chicken broth was very strange, and it sounded exactly like something that Tiffany would have said. Then, upon the waitress returning to the table, she told the one that looked like Tiffany that she looked like the missing girl from Pensacola. After this, the entire group got up and left. Immediately after hearing this tip, Tiffany's parents called the restaurant to see if they had any security footage, but this tip came in too late, and by the time they had called the restaurant, the footage had already been taped over, so they weren't really completely sure if this was actually Tiffany. But this sighting seemed very credible and got the family really thinking. They really started to believe that this could have been Tiffany and that she could be the victim of human trafficking. This is when they started to really do some research into human trafficking to see if it was really a possible explanation, which is when they stumbled across another case of a young woman near Panama City who had been drugged and taken to New Orleans by two men who trafficked her. They worked with the class kids to figure out how this trafficking works and found out that people, of course, will take these unsuspecting women, will drug them, get them dependent on whatever drug they give them, and then traffic them. This seemed to put the pieces of the puzzle together that they were missing in this entire thing. Tiffany was a cute, friendly, trusting young woman who would go out of her way to help others. Her family suspects that it could have been pretty easy to take advantage of her. To add on to that, we know that this part of Florida is a huge tourist destination and there's lots of ports for transporting goods, so there's people coming in and out all the time. And Route 10 that passes directly through Pensacola and New Orleans is a huge hub for traffickers to come through and take women and children and just head right out of the state before anyone even notices. Florida is one of the top states for human trafficking. This is when the next possible sighting of Tiffany came in. A woman called from Alabama about an hour off of Route 10 who said that she saw Tiffany hitchhiking with an older man. This woman was very confident that this was Tiffany, so as soon as she saw it, she called police. Detectives in Pensacola immediately sent out detectives to Alabama, who actually discovered that this wasn't Tiffany, but just a woman from Alaska who just looked very similar to Tiffany. Then, right past the 2-year anniversary of Tiffany's disappearance, the family received a Facebook message from a woman who said that she was suspicious that her boyfriend could have been responsible for Tiffany's disappearance. She said that her boyfriend was acting strangely. She found pictures of Tiffany within his belongings, and her boyfriend even admitted to harming Tiffany, and that she caught this entire confession on tape. However, when Sydney asked what she could do to get a hold of this confession, this person asked for $3,000 upfront before they would send over the confession. Of course, Cindy wanted proof of this before she just sent this random person $3,000. So this girl sent a little bit of the recording to Cindy, who then sent it over to Noelle. Noelle heard the little bits of this and it sounded pretty real, but she was skeptical, so she went online to find if she could find other doctored versions of this confession, and within 20 minutes she found the full audio recording of this confession, which belonged to a completely different case from a completely different man in Pensacola, Florida. This sent some relief to the family, but again, it's just horrible. The second I saw that this person wanted $3,000 for this confession, I knew it was going to be fake. It's just so horrible for someone to do to this family, and they actually tracked the IP address back to good old Russia, so there's nothing that they could have done. This was full-on extortion, taking advantage of a desperate family who just wanted to bring her daughter home, but this is something they learned that they were going to have to deal with. Good thing they caught on at some point that people just want to take advantage of them and they didn't send over the money right away. I mean, I'm sure this is something that's happened multiple times in maybe smaller instances, but nevertheless, I'm sure it happens all the time. But I could see how these people can catch families at their most desperate times and just get money off of them. It's absolutely disgusting. The last tip that has really surfaced was in December of 2015. A witness came forward after seeing Tiffany's case on the media, saying that the day that Tiffany's car was discovered, the witness had seen a man in his 30s wearing red shorts and no shirt lifting up Tiffany's tailgate, which does kind of match up with what we were saying earlier about a witness saying that they saw a man leaving Tiffany's car. They just said that they remembered this man because the car was parked unusually. Other than this, I haven't seen any more tips or sightings that could have been credible. I took some time to go through the Find Tiffany Facebook page to see if there were any more big updates other than what I was finding finding in articles, but there wasn't really anything credible. They did have some other tips come in, possible leads, possible sightings, but none of them seem to have panned out. So I'm not going to sit here and go through a whole list of, sightings that haven't panned out. The family continues to deal with harassment and people coming in just trying to mess with them or to get something out of them and, trying to gain attention or whatever it might be. And it's absolutely devastating every single time, but they are so strong and they know what to look for now when it comes to, these random tips and leads that people are trying to bring in. They pretty much know what to look out for in terms of being scammed. At this point, pretty much anything is possible, but most people, including myself, think that it's a huge possibility that she was taken into human trafficking. It's totally possible, including with the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, there was absolutely no trace left behind. And the fact that there was that waitress in New Orleans, of all places, that actually might have seen her. Of course, it's possible that this wasn't really her and that there were just like these really weird similarities, but all the facts surrounding that sighting, including the fact that they just got up and left after this person said that you look like that missing girl from Pensacola, it's just too strange to discredit this sighting. Other possibilities, of course, are that someone just harmed her and hid her body extremely well. The other possibility is that some individual took her and has just been holding her captive all of these years. Some people even believe that maybe she was taken into a cult, and she was brainwashed and convinced that she needed to leave everything behind and that she's been in that cult ever since. Of all the possibilities, I do think that this one is the least likely because, if we just think about what's more likely, I definitely think that human trafficking fits a lot better into this situation with what we know, and that's what I go off of, is what we know, not what we don't know. The fact that this was done so cleanly, again, with no witnesses, nothing left behind, it makes it very obvious that someone who took her had experience with this and was very skilled at doing this type of thing. And when I hear that, my mind immediately jumps to human trafficking. This is such a scary case, but just like with a lot of these cases, we can learn something from it. I think that just the threat of trafficking is enough for us to take the steps to protect ourselves. One of the biggest factors that played a role in this case is that everybody around Tiffany knew that she was this free spirit who would go out on a whim and do something without telling anyone. And I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with that. I don't want anyone to get the idea that I'm blaming her in any sort of way. But I do think that it's a good idea to at least let someone know, if you decide to go and do something spontaneous or go on a hike by yourself, I think it's always a good idea to let someone know, give them a general time of when you're going to check back in with them just so they know where you are, at least someone. I know a lot of people share their location with their friends, myself included, which I think is a great idea. That way, if your friends, happen to look at the app and notice that you're somewhere you shouldn't be, or if they notice that your phone is turned off for way too long, and they can immediately know that something is wrong. There are a lot of things wrong with technology and how we are so sucked in to constantly being on our phones and constantly talking to people and constantly posting things, but this is one very big advantage of that. I know that if I just randomly stopped replying to my group chat, or if I stopped showing up to school without saying anything, or if I just, was out on a trip and just decided to stop texting my boyfriend while I was out, or if I didn't post anything for a while, or if my location was in a weird spot or wasn't showing up on Find My Friends, that someone would immediately know that something was wrong. If I decide that I'm just gonna chill, maybe take a hike, spend some time away from everything, turn off my phone, just kind of get away from technology, which is something that I think everyone should do once in a while. But if I do decide to do that, I will tell someone. And I think that in general is a very good idea. Looking at all of these true crime cases, I go into so much detail when I'm researching and I try to figure out how this could have happened, what happened, and how this could have been prevented. That's what's running through my mind in every single one of these cases that I research. So I try to live my life with the lessons that I learned from doing these cases, and I hope you guys are doing the same thing. And don't just stop at living your life with those lessons, but spread those lessons to everyone else in your life as well. I think if we all take the steps to protect ourselves, let someone know where we are most of the time, you know, just have a general idea of where your friends are, it's gonna make us more safe as a whole. And it can prevent a lot of these kind of trafficking incidences from happening. I think eventually I'm going to make a whole video on trafficking and kidnapping and just things in general that you can do to keep yourself safe. But for now, you know, the things that I just mentioned are a pretty good idea, in my opinion, from what I've learned from researching these cases. So I could just rant on all day about staying safe and making sure someone knows where you are, but at the end of the day, it's not foolproof. Tiffany had someone who did care about her, who did pretty much know where she was and was trying to get a hold of her when he noticed that she wasn't home, and was concerned enough to say something to his daughter. And then when she still didn't show up, he put the steps into place to go and find her. It's no one's fault but the person who took her. It's not even her family's fault for thinking that she just went off on an adventure, because I guarantee that if a lot of us stopped responding and, you know, we were the type of person who liked to be outdoors, that a lot of our friends and family would think the same thing. So it's not their fault. It's not her friend's fault. It's not her fault. It's whoever did this to her. It's their fault. At the end of the day, we have no idea where this beautiful young woman is, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. I genuinely hope that someday soon she is found and brought home safely so her family can get the closure that they need and deserve. Tiffany Heaven Daniels went missing on August 12th, 2013 from Pensacola, Florida. She is 5'7" with blonde hair and blue eyes. She was 25 at the time of her disappearance, but now she would have been 31 years old. She has tattoos on the top of her feet of seeds growing into vines that bloom at the top. If you have absolutely any information about Tiffany's disappearance, please contact the Pensacola Police Department at 850-435-1940. So that is all I have for this video today, and now I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that Tiffany is still out there? Do you think that she's unfortunately the victim of human trafficking, or do you think that she isn't alive anymore and that someone did something horrible to her? Please let me know in the comments below. But if you like this video, please make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked down below. And if you have absolutely any case suggestions, please make sure to send them over to my email at RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. Every single case that I cover on this channel are suggestions directly from that email or my Patreon, so do not hesitate to send those suggestions over. With that, I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!